At the depths of my shame and my self-loathing, if you came to me and told me, Asha, you are worthy just as you are, I would have reached unprecedented levels of shame. Like if a therapist were to see me, they would want to talk about me in the break room, okay? They'd want to all study me. Because the truth is, like, all this therapy speak, the self-love mantras, the hustle, get over yourself stuff, even that, it just doesn't sit right with my brain. You know what I mean? I needed something analytical but not cold, emotionally complex but also practical. You know, I needed a new framework on how to think. And if you're hearing all of this saying, oh my god, yes, then I got you, okay? If you clicked on this video, I'm assuming you feel what I used to feel like. I didn't like myself at all. And frankly, if you ask me why, I could give you a couple of reasons as to why I didn't like myself. But the truth was, I just always felt that way. And let me tell you, not liking yourself is a surefire way to live one of the worst possible versions of your life. It's like wearing an ankle monitor wherever you go, okay? But the good part is, it's one of the few things in life that's actually fully within your control. And I'm going to teach you exactly how to fix it. If you have no idea who I am, my name is Asha, and that little baby boy's name is Rafael. Now, I do emotional mentoring for professionals. So what this means is that I've worked with over 300 people from companies like all of these to go from, overlooked, like talked over, to being the first person that people think of at work. So these are kind of people who are generally quite quiet, right? They feel a ton. They're really perspective. But the problem is, when it comes to high stakes decisions or going after what they're truly capable of, they get overwhelmed and they freeze right up. They have a lot of blockers when it comes to making sense of everything that they pick up and they feel. Now look, I've done this with people who on paper look like they've got everything figured out, okay? Like the good career, the financial stability, the independence, but every single one of them had the self-perception of a circus funhouse mirror. You know, one of those mirrors that you see where you stand right there and like it shows you all wonky? Yeah. So the way I help them is by getting them to finally like themselves. And if you're asking, how on earth do I do that? I teach them the skill of self-perception. How do you see yourself clearly without getting distorted by your own biases and the wrong people's opinions? So I'm going to teach you how to see yourself accurately so that you stop leaving so much on the table. All right. So this is going to be a really long video. So I'm going to tell you how it's going to go. Okay. I'm going to start with the problem. Then I'm going to tell you my theory for how I solve this problem. And then I'm going to move on to the 3 implications of what it means to actually use this theory. All good? Perfect. So let's start with the real question, which is, why do we suck at seeing ourselves? But actually, wait, an even more important question. Why do we not realize how much we suck at seeing ourselves? Well, if you actually try asking people if they see themselves clearly, they will look at you like you're the unemployed friend on a Tuesday who just did shrooms, right? Like, oh, do I see myself clearly? Because to them, it's like, duh, obviously I see myself. Like, who wouldn't be able to see themselves? Like, how much time, like free time do you have on your hands anyways to be asking all these kind of questions, huh? That's the problem. It's so easy to brush it off as this like therapy woo-woo exercise. But the question is simple. If you were to meet yourself, would you like who you are? Maybe at first you have no idea how to answer, but then you think a little bit and you go, yeah, I think I'll get along with myself. I'm pretty friendly. Now I'm gonna call you out on this, okay? I know you're doing every single thing to not offend anyone and be as nice as possible. So obviously the most logical conclusion is going to be that, you are going to get along with yourself, right? Because your outside personality only has one mode, which is be nice, don't look incompetent, and don't seem unfriendly. The reality is that you might find yourself struggling to answer that question because you have no idea what it would be like to meet yourself, which is precisely why you need to learn how to self-perceive. But the problem is, it's not so easy when our mind is just drawn to, negative and tumultuous voice, the loudest voices. Why can't you be more like your sister? Why can't you do anything right? Yeah, I'm gonna need you to start pulling your weight around here. You don't seem to be taking much initiative these days. And then out of nowhere, someone comes and they say, I think you're really wonderful. I think you're intelligent and wonderful and I love being around you. And you're like, okay, sure, Mr. Nice Guy. Look at the Mr. Nice Guy over here. Like, what do you get paid extra for toxic positivity? Like, who do you really work for? But even when you try not to listen to those negative voices, the truth is this shit just isn't easy, right? Because where do you even start when it comes to forming some sort of idea about who you are? Because at first, you get yanked into existence, and then your parents tell you a bunch of things about who you are, and then good luck if they're toxic or unhealthy in any way, because that's going to be like having an undiagnosed autoimmune disease. You're living and you have no idea, and everything's just harder for you than it is for everybody else, and you have no idea why. So you just think that something is wrong with you and you are deficient. That's a data point about who you are. Anyway, then you go to school, you get bullied, you make some friends, you ace a subject, you fail a subject. You go to work and you have a boss that likes you, another one thinks you're slacking off. Or maybe we should just listen to grandma, who thinks we're the most perfect person in the whole world. Now, at first you might think that the problem is we got way too many data points, right, from our experiences telling us who we are, and all come with their own little biases. And what we should do is to create a framework to know how to weigh each and every one of these data points. And you've got good instincts on this. This is why books like How to Not Give a Fuck, right, by Mark Manson, or quotes like don't listen or don't take advice from people who don't live a life that you do not respect, or don't listen to the haters, right? What they're basically saying is don't give weight to every single data point. But what I think that's important, I think it actually misses the core of the problem, which is not focused on who is giving the data point, but how you receive it. It's focused on the receiving end. Now that's why my theory comes in, the meal versus ingredient theory. Now to explain it, let's start with this. How are we taught to see people? Now I know, okay, really abstract question, but let me paint you a situation to really drive this point home, okay? You ever walk out of an interview feeling like existentially violated? Like they were looking for a very specific set of ingredients and you just did not meet them. You know what I mean? Ah, yes. Okay, so tell me about a time when you encountered a problem in your team, and through leadership and outside of the box thinking, you managed to outperform and hit all your KPIs and also increase shareholder value. Nothing? Okay, nothing, it's fine. Let's move on to the next question. And if you don't have those ingredients, yeah, you're cut, okay? It's not just a rejection, it's an oversimplification of who you are. But it's not just in job interviews. It's even with parents. You hear parents saying they want a bunch of good ingredients, right? Hardworking, good prestigious job, helpful, and they don't want the bad ingredients, which is like emotional, self-centered, ungrateful. You see with people who are dating with their lists that they have of people, right? And even within friends, when we're talking about other people, we talk about others like their lists of ingredients, right? Some things that we like, some things that we'd rather get rid of, and some things that we want. And we even think of ourselves the same way, right? I like that I'm very understanding of others. I want to get rid of my low self-esteem, and I want to be more confident. But what if I told you that this way of seeing people as lists of ingredients is just flat out wrong? And it could not be farther from how you're actually supposed to see people. Okay, let me explain. If I asked you to think about someone you love deeply and tell me and list down like all the things that you love about them, you'd give me a bunch of wonderful ingredients, right? You tell me, oh, I love how they're endlessly curious about everything around them. I love how they're so attentive to everyone's needs. I love how they smell. Now, I'm sure this person has gone through rough patches, right? Times when they mess up, when they lost their spark for a while, right? Maybe they just weren't curious or attentive to other people. Maybe they were in a depressive state and they had tons of gut issues, and because of that, they don't even smell like themselves anymore. But did that change your love for them? So even without those ingredients, you'll still love them, right? And if you think about it, you'll probably say, well, of course I still love them, because I know them. I know they're a good person. And now that is what I want us to pay such close attention to. Now, we love the people that we love when they mess up, when they go through long periods of time when they're not even themselves anymore, when they hurt us. We love them even when to everyone else it doesn't even make sense. But it's not even with the people that we love, right? We stick with toxic friends way longer than we should have, right? Sacrifice our happiness for family that give more respect to a stranger than they do to us. And stay with partners that somehow make us feel more alone with their company. So even when the list of bad ingredients keep piling up, we don't even see it that way. And there lies two contradictions. The first being that despite how disgustingly prevalent ingredient mode thinking is, in practice, it always breaks down the more time we spend with people. We stop thinking in these terms. And the second contradiction is, despite this, when it comes to the person that you've known the longest, you still see them in ingredient mode. And that person is you. So this is the core of the problem that I think most people don't see. It is that we're really pressured to think of people in ingredient mode when our mind naturally sees people as meals.
What is the charge? Eating a meal? A succulent Chinese meal?
So the real question is, what happens when you finally see yourself as a meal? When you do to yourself what you naturally do for so many others. Now, there are 3 big implications when you start seeing yourself as a meal, okay? And the first one is going to be the foundational shift. So what is a meal? It's when you take your ingredients, you prep them, you cook them, and you let them interact with each other. And they produce flavors that didn't exist in any ingredient by itself. And that's the key. A meal isn't the sum of its ingredients, it's what happens when the ingredients combine. Which is why you can never understand an ingredient in isolation. It is always connected to others. So what does this mean in practice? It means that when you tell me an ingredient about a person, whether it's some quirky habit that they have, what school they went to, how soft-spoken they are, what kind of movies they like, I don't just see one single ingredient, I see a bunch of other ingredients that is very likely connected to. Let me give you an example that I see countless times because it's what I do for work. Okay, so someone comes to me and says, Asha, I've got the ingredient of being the anxious one in work who never speaks up. Now, they think it's just one ingredient, but I see a ton of other ingredients connected to it. Now, I see someone who is deeply attentive to other people's needs and very often forgets their own. Someone who, when they feel safe, open up and they're really fun to be around. Someone who never makes another person feel judged. Someone who always tries to do right for others but never really does right for themselves. Someone who feels immense responsibility that often blinds them in seeing the responsibilities that others have. Now, this is not me trying to be like Mr. Nice Guy over here. It's literally pattern recognition. It's something I've seen hundreds of times, okay? And it's me going, okay, I've seen this ingredient before, and it almost always comes with all of these other ingredients as well. Just like how often you get garlic and onion paired together. It's not always, but damn, is it often. So if you've been feeling really frustrated because you see yourself as someone who's stuck, like despite the fact that you've done tons of, those self-help, like you've watched tons of videos, read books, like you've done lots of things to improve yourself, but you find that it works for a little while, but then you find yourself just like going all back again to the old habits, it's precisely because the ingredients interact. So what this means is that it's never as simple as saying, how can I remove this ingredient of being anxious and shy so that I can speak up better? You have to ask yourself, what other ingredients are going to be affected? So you want to stop being shy and start speaking up, right? What about your attentiveness to other people's moods so you don't cause conflict? Because when you start speaking up, there's going to be tons of conflict. What about when you get disrespected at home? So you want to speak up when you're disrespected at work, but when it happens at home, you don't want to react? How about the moment someone calls you problematic? It's going to destabilize you because in your head, you have this idea that you've got this ingredient of always easy to get along with. You see, removing one ingredient, it simply changes the whole meal. And if you don't prepare for that, you are going to backtrack real fast because all of these ingredients interact with each other and appear in all different aspects of your life. This explains why a lot of your self-work might not have given you the kind of results that you've always wanted, because when you try to remove one ingredient, it is an identity shift. Now, I'm not saying that being more outspoken means you cannot be attentive to other people's meals. It means that it affects it. The other ingredients are going to need some modifications in order for the meal to make sense to you. So another example would be if you want to stop spiraling whenever you make a mistake. Okay, this is a common one I see. It's not as easy as just doing some breathing techniques and just soothing yourself by saying that it's okay. The tendency to beat yourself up on mistakes is likely tied to the ingredients of being attentive to other people's needs, noticing small details that other people miss, and hearing all sides of the story without getting defensive. Even ingredients like staying quiet while a parent freaks out at you, or always going and doing what your friends or your partner wants, just while believing that you actually have no preference by saying like, yeah, I'm down for whatever, like what do you guys want to do? All these ingredients interact with each other. And when you don't recognize that, it is going to feel impossible to grow because you can't just forgive yourself for making a mistake at work while being quiet at home when you're being wrongfully berated by a shit-ass parent. You can't be all cool and chill and say, yes, it's okay, we're all human, we make mistakes, and then go out of your way to ignore all of your needs while going along with what everybody else wants. How is it possible to recognize that yes, you're human and you make mistakes, but also not recognize that you're human, you have needs and preferences? You see, every one of these ingredients, they interact with each other. So if you're trying not to spiral and after making a mistake and you're trying to talk yourself out of it simply, right? Maybe it works for a while. But as soon as those other connecting ingredients get activated, you're going to get pulled right back into the old routine. And when you internalize this, everything is going to shift for you. How you see yourself is going to shift. I mean, like, think about it. Whenever you see someone who's like anxious and awkward, do you look at that person and go, brother, ugh, right? Or when someone makes a mistake, do you think, oh my gosh, fire them immediately? No, right? Because you perceive a ton of other ingredients that they have. But when you don't like something about yourself, you see it in isolation. Like, ugh, just throw the whole dish out. But when you see yourself as a meal, your reaction is different. You're not upset that you're stuck and you can't change. You're in investigation mode. Like, where else is this behavior showing up? How does it affect every other part of my behavior and thinking? What other ingredients is it supporting or influencing? And guess what you don't have time for when you're in investigation mode? Shame, self-blame, and just feeling downright awful about yourself. So the first implication of seeing yourself as a meal is that you naturally stop isolating the parts of you that you don't like. You start to see yourself as a whole system. But when so many ingredients are connected to each other, how do you actually change the parts of yourself that you don't like? Like, are you just supposed to stay stuck and be content with just being the way you are? Absolutely the hell not. That is where the second implication comes in. Now, when you see yourself as a meal, you understand that every ingredient is doing a job. And once you uncover what that job is, you can understand how it affects every other ingredient and how to find a better alternative. So you discover that a meal has high fructose corn syrup. Now, that provides sweetness, right? What you want to do is to find a better alternative that also provides sweetness, not removing the sweetness altogether. Now, let me give you an example that I work with all the time. Someone comes to me and says, Asha, like, I want to be taken seriously. I have the ingredient of not being taken seriously. I am so sick and tired of it. Like, people just kind of like ignore me. I am just unimportant. I'm not on people's minds. I'm just invisible in groups. I want people to take me seriously. Now, before they came to me, they're in ingredient mode. Right? They're watching videos on how to remove this ingredient, how to be more charismatic, how to ask questions in a way that makes you seem interesting, how to be assertive, tips and strategies and the psychology of what makes people listen to you. But when we're together, we are in meal mode and we just ask one simple question: why am I invisible to others? Maybe after some digging, you'll find that you're subconsciously behaving in a way that actively removes all attention from you. You're the chill, laid-back friend that just likes to sit and listen, you know? You're the person that says, yeah, I'm not really into like being the center of attention. You're very attentive to other people's moods so you don't upset them, right? You're really quick to forgive and say, don't worry about it. Or maybe not even bring things up at all. And unbeknownst to them, I don't think I've said the word unbeknownst out loud before. Yeah, unbeknownst to them, they're behaving in a way that doesn't trigger a deep shame from being seen. So tell me, how can any of this confidence tips or tricks work when you're actively fighting to stay out of attention because it makes you uncomfortable? It's a tug of war, okay? There are two wolves inside of you. But the investigation doesn't end there. Like, let's go deeper. Like, why do you feel uncomfortable being seen? Maybe you grew up in a household where your parents provided for your basic needs, but they didn't really show that they liked you. God forbid that they ask you an opinion on something. They didn't really care about what you're interested in, or maybe even put you down for it. They constantly had something negative to say whenever they came back home from work. Like, why are you eating like that? Why are you dressed like that? Why is your door closed? Why aren't you studying? So not only did you feel intensely disliked by your parents, although back then I'm pretty sure you didn't have the words for that feeling, but you also feel like everything you're doing is wrong. Every little thing had something wrong with it. So you just numbed out, right? You just hid as much as possible. Whenever you came back home, you just went straight to your room. You didn't want to get any attention. And it's not even a conscious choice. You just didn't want to have to hear them attack you. And slowly you just stop talking about your interests. You stop talking about your friends. And this why affects so many ingredients. Like, you're laid back because it makes you super uncomfortable to voice your preferences. You're the chill, laid-back friend who likes to listen, because the idea of just sharing who you are and what you want makes you feel like, oh my gosh, they're going to think I'm boring or stupid or wrong. And you're quick to forgive and don't bring things up because you don't want to be called problematic or petty. Now, all these ingredients that people praise you for, being easygoing, laid back, attentive, good listener, they all protect you from being seen. There's a shame associated with being seen. It invites like rejection, disagreement. It feels like a rejection just for being you. So the question isn't how do I get the ingredient or being taken more seriously by being firm and setting boundaries. The real question is, am I ready to be seen? Knowing that it'll trigger my shame of being criticized. To put up your hand and say, this is what I want, this is how I think, and this is who I am. You have to replace the ingredient of shame of being seen with actually wanting to be seen. Not just tolerating it, not just being okay with it, but actually desiring it. That is the healthier alternative. And let me tell you, replacing ingredients, it's like dragging your ass through hot tarmac. It is so hard because you gotta relive all those moments that created those whys. You gotta grieve them, feel them in your body, like mourn them. And then you gotta do the hard work of noticing whenever it comes up in your body again. When you're gonna lead a meeting, or you wanna speak up and disagree with someone, or when you're even having lunch with your colleagues, guess what? That feeling is gonna start creeping back up. And you gotta wrestle with it with a new perspective. And let me tell you, like, actual growth isn't just like a mental exercise. Like, I'm gonna just, talk myself out of it, debate my thoughts, even though it's important. But the real thing, the thing I would say even more so, it's actually a physical thing. It is when you feel your chest tightening, your ear ringing, your heart's racing, your neck's aching, like you're having cold sweats. You're going to have to be in control of that feeling, to recognize it and lead yourself. You gotta guide yourself with a new lens on seeing the situation. One not fueled by shame, by those whys, a healthier source of sweetness. And gradually you'll start to open up because you intuitively realize that doing so opens you up to, being criticized and people saying they don't like you, but it also opens you up to genuine connection. When you speak up about a preference or disagreement, some people are going to see you as problematic and annoying, but some people see you as someone with self-respect. These ingredients are all slowly changing. You're a good listener, but you're also a damn good sharer. You're laid back sometimes, and other times you know what the hell you want and you're not afraid to share it. You forgive quickly when it's warranted, and don't forgive at all when it's not. So you have all the ingredients that you had initially, but they're starting to look different. So you're going from a meal that had no salt and like barely any flavoring to one that's packing like a flavorful punch, right? An acquired taste where some people are gonna love it and others not gonna really like it at all and don't really get what the big deal is. But one thing is sure is that everyone is going to remember your meal. And by then, you're going to find yourself doing all those confidence tips and tricks naturally without even thinking about them. So the second implication is this. All those ingredients that you don't like about yourself, they've got reasons to be there. So it's not some failure on your part to be experiencing any of these things. Now, these two implications fix your self-perception by removing the existing distortions you have of yourself. You can think of it like removing or fixing the cracks in your glasses. When you hyperfixate on your bad ingredients and you carry shame that they're there, you're basically applying an incorrect model on how to see yourself. And you can see like none of this is me saying like, oh, you're amazing, you're wonderful, like you have so many reasons to like yourself. No. I'm just saying, can you just not wear broken glasses when you're looking at yourself? Seeing yourself as a meal, it forces you to be curious, to uncover the patterns of how you operate, and most importantly, it forces you to be nuanced, to understand that you're not a simple list of ingredients, you're a complex meal. Now, the third implication is like taking your newly fixed glasses and adjusting the prescription so you see things clearly, which means we're going to be looking on the outside. Now, let's start at the most obvious. When it comes to meals, most people have their preferences, right? Which is why you often hear people saying, well, some people are just not gonna like your meal. And that's okay. Just don't listen to their opinions, right? But that's where I disagree. I wanna know exactly why someone doesn't like me. Don't fuck the haters, study them. You wanna know all the different variations that people are perceiving your meal, or the list of ingredients they're simplifying you to. But wait, didn't I say that the whole point of healthy self-perception is to ignore the opinions of people that don't like us? Like, shouldn't we be ignoring the people that don't really like our meal? Well, let's try putting that into practice. Someone calls you arrogant or bitchy. Your boss thinks you're not showing enough initiative or taking enough leadership. A group of acquaintances misunderstood something, and now everyone thinks that you overstep someone's boundaries and you're kind of a bad person. A toxic parent, or hell, your whole family thinks you're being ungrateful and just selfish. These are all real examples from clients, by the way. Are you just gonna ignore all of that? Look, your close friends, they might try to make you feel better by trying to point out all the bad ingredients, right? Oh, that colleague is judgmental. Oh, your boss is a dick. That group of acquaintances, they're toxic. And your parents, your family, they're dysfunctional anyway. Who cares what they think? But you're still burning, aren't you? You're gonna try to watch tons of videos on like how to let go of this anger, how to master detachment, how not to care so much. But the reality is, when your deep shame is triggered, you just gotta let it go. I mean, like, what if they're right? Like, what if they're seeing something and we're being totally oblivious about it? Your mind is rejecting these ingredient level explanation because it is craving for meal mode complexity. And that's precisely my point. When you truly understand why someone doesn't like you, their perspective, their biases, their thought processes, and how it all connects, it becomes so much easier to actually just ignore it. Confidently ignore it with no effort. Let me tell you that. No effort. So let me give you an example, okay? You have no idea the number of people that have told me that they initially thought that I was a stuck-up bitch. Okay, they did not like me. And a lot of them ended up becoming friends. And I would ask them, like, why didn't you like me? Like, why would you think I'm a stuck-up bitch? And they would say, oh, it's because of the way you looked and how you carried yourself. You just felt like you thought that you were better than everybody else. And I was just dumbfounded. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I was drowning in anxiety and insecurity, and this is my nightmare. Like, I wanted to appear the opposite. And now apparently I'm being perceived as someone like a stuck-up person. And my close friends, let me tell you, sweethearts, their heart's in the right place, and they would tell me like, screw that, I don't see that. Like, I don't see why they would even say that. Like, they're blind, right? What do you mean stuck up? Like, you're the sweetest person. They would try to take care of my feelings, but the problem is these are ingredient level explanations, right? Saying like, oh, they're blind, right? I needed to know why, and so I would ask. So I ended up probing deeper, and I found out two things. Number one was that turns out to a lot of people, I have what they call a resting bitch face, an RBF, okay? And number two, because I'm a huge introvert, because I was so anxious and insecure for most of my life, that introversion got cranked up like real high. I'd spend all of my break times alone. I would pass so many times on hanging out with colleagues or even like acquaintances. I wouldn't even say hi to someone when I walked into a room or I saw them outside because I just didn't want to get in their way. I didn't want to be annoying. I just thought it was awkward and I felt like a nuisance. Had zero idea. No idea at all that this was coming off as really unfriendly. So it turns out to them, the meal that they were picking up was misinterpreted as someone who thought that they were better than everybody else. And because of this, they naturally assumed all these other ingredients that I would have, like snobby and selfish and vain. And when you have that bias of someone, it is just like, you know, when you watch movies and sometimes one character will be casted so perfectly with a hateable face. Like, you just look at them and you're like, I don't trust anything this person says or does. Even if they do very nice things, the whole time you're thinking like, no. Like, something's up, like, they're gonna screw up. This is not genuine. I don't believe this for a second. I felt like that character, and I probably was that character for a lot of people. You know, people started defensively listening to me. And when I disagreed with something or had a different idea, I was looked at as like really this hard to work with and being just like, ugh, you're being very disagreeable. Or when I was really excited to share something, I could come off as like arrogant or even bitchy. People just looking to disagree with me or point out what's wrong, and they just didn't assume that I had any goodwill. This specific issue I see a ton with the women that I work with, particularly those who are like mid-career, especially in like male-dominant industries like tech. You see, like all of that, like learning how people saw me, was such valuable information to me. I wanted to understand all the different permutation of how people perceive me, and then I get to look at every single one of them and decide, like, do I respect how this person thinks and why this person feels this way about me? there anything I can do to address it head on? Okay, so let's say the people who thought that I was really unfriendly because of my anxious, introverted behavior. The truth is, if I really think about it, those people clearly or probably did not grow up with social anxiety themselves, so they couldn't pick up the subtleties that would differentiate between me and someone who actually is a stuck-up person who thought that they were better than everybody else. And to be honest, that's understandable. I understand that, right? And that's not something that really bothers me because I see their side. Or let's say someone who thinks that I have an RBF, like, well, they're looking at a couple of features of the way I hold my face and they think of someone that's mean, that's unlikable, that, is not a nice person to be around. And I can't fault them for that. If that's just how they perceive it, that's how they perceive it. So what I can do is just work on maybe being more myself. And the truth is, when I'm comfortable, when I'm close to people I'm close with, I talk a lot, I smile a lot, I crack a lot of jokes. So perhaps if I try to be more myself, I can end up breaking that view that they have of me. But let's say even after correcting all of these issues, right, having one-on-one conversations with people, trying to just be more myself, people still don't like me. They talk over me. Someone gives me backhanded compliments. They're dismissing me a lot. They're just generally just passive aggressive or just outright just disrespectful to me. And through some observations, I find out that, oh, it's a gender thing or it's a color thing. Now that is something I don't respect at all. I don't respect the kind of thinking it's attached to, and the truth is that kind of thinking just can't be changed easily. I mean, it can be reprimanded, but very unlikely that I'm going to be able to change their mind on that, strange. So because of that, it actually allows me to just not care. I don't even have to put effort to detach. It just happens naturally because I just don't even respect how someone can even think that way. And something really interesting happens when I just detach and just stop caring because I don't respect how that person thinks. I actually start to become comfortable with trying things out to see that if I can work my way around that bias. Now, one of the few things that I do to counteract these kind of dumbass biases is that I actually tackle it head on by using humor. Now, this is not going to be for everybody, okay? But for example, something that I do is I sometimes introduce myself as a diversity hire before actually telling what I do. And this catches people off guard. But most importantly, what it does is that if someone has that bias, it lets them know that I know that this exists. I do it for a bunch of different stereotypes and assumptions, and believe it or not, it's had a surprising impact on my social dynamics, but honestly, that's for another video altogether. But the point is, this is what I'm doing with clients all day. We're breaking down how people could be perceiving their meal, what biases are at play, what is fixable versus what is just somebody else's nonsense. It's honestly just pattern recognition from doing this hundreds of times. But look, every now and then I can be myself, I can crack my jokes, I can tackle things head on, and people might just still not like my meal, right? It might not even be like a racial or gender thing. It can just be they can't get past the RBF, they don't like the way I think, the way I talk, I don't know, the way I smell, I have no idea. But whatever it is, they just don't like me, and that's okay. Because the more I was myself, the more I found people who actually really liked me because my meal had more flavor, right? And so I found people who really, really liked me to the point where when someone didn't like me, I just had barely any reaction at all. Okay, so let me tell you a story. I once had an Uber driver.
I never went to Uber driver.
Who was driving me to the airport. I got in and he asked me where I'm headed. I told him, and then he said, how long are you going to be there? And I said, over a month. And he goes like, a month? I was like, yeah, I work online. And he said, work online? Like, what about, like, are you saving up for a house? Are you going to settle down? Mind you, I was in my 20s. And I said, no, I don't really, I'm not really planning to get like a house here or anything like that. I don't have that in my mind at the moment. And he said, oh, if you were my daughter, I'll be really sad. And I was like, oh, yeah, if you were my dad, I'll be really sad. Right? And look, he was rude as hell, and you can bet that I gave his ass a 1-star rating for that uncontrollable verbal diarrhea. But the truth is, I wasn't really that bothered because I encountered people like this before. And instead of thinking, you know what, screw these geriatrics, I went to try to understand, like, why would he feel that way? And there's just tons of these older traditional type thinking people who just can't and won't wrap their heads around the fact that people can live their lives differently, right? Because we don't even see the world the same way because they don't value personal freedom. They value, duty and like familiar responsibilities. It's about tradition. We had such different values. It was not that he was rejecting me, even though that's what it seemed like on the surface. It was just that we had such different value systems and approaches to life. In fact, I'm pretty sure when he was my age, he probably didn't have the freedom to think that he could live life differently. So you see, previously, these kind of comments would trigger my shame, and my course of action was to ignore it as much as possible and just focus on my good intentions, right? And having my friends say like, oh, screw that person, that guy was just old and he had no idea what he was doing, his grandchildren probably hate him or something like that, I don't know, right? But when I switched to curiosity, I could investigate what kinds of meals they were perceiving, and I could choose how to respond to them. And it gave me so much control over my reaction and whether or not I would want to tackle their impressions of me. So the third implication of seeing yourself as a meal is that you are continuously learning of all the different ways people are perceiving your meal. And as you see the variations, you get to choose which ones you respect and want to take action on and which one to dismiss. And it won't take you doing all these different practices on how to detach. It will happen naturally. It really takes that scary unknown of, what if people think I'm awful or I'm not a good person or incompetent, and it demystifies it instead of just telling you to push it aside and just say, oh, they're just idiots. Now, this last implication is the most important one simply because of how under-acknowledged it is. When it comes to improving yourself and your life, most people think that it's 100% focusing on your inner side, on yourself and how you work. But it's actually 50% figuring yourself out and 50% figuring how other people work. Which is why learning how to read people and understand how they think and their biases and their motivations is such a life-changing skill. So if you love social psychology, relationship dynamics, like connecting all the different things people say and do to uncover deeper motivations, then stay tuned for the next video on like how to read people. I'll be posting it. It'll be one of the next few videos that I post. So these 3 implications are some of the most impactful once you start seeing yourself as a meal. But honestly, there are just so many more implications, so many more things that this theory explains that puts words to feelings that you've never really felt before. So for example, you might spend a lifetime trying to get all the ingredients that your parents wanted, that society desires, and then at the end you'll have like a ton of ingredients that everybody's like, wow, you're amazing, but the truth is you just feel empty and depressed inside because none of these ingredients actually make a meal that you enjoy. And you're gonna feel really guilty because you're like, everyone's saying my life is great and I'm amazing, and I know some people would kill to be where I am at and have what I have, but am I just being ungrateful for being anxious and depressed? No. And oh my god, it can even explain relationship dynamics, right? Where some people are just junk food to you, where they're delicious, but you have too often and you're not gonna feel so good, right? But you can't stop. Other people are comfort food. Some people are really, really healthy for you, right? In your eyes, they're healthy for you, but the truth is, this tastes kind of bland. It might not be what you actually really want. And don't even get me started on how your taste buds change with time, okay? Like, I hated beans, the texture of beans, my entire life. Like, could not handle them. And out of nowhere, like 2 years ago, I started liking beans, and now I'm beating it up on a weekly basis. Crazy. When you let this theory actually settle in your mind, I'm telling you, it's like having a whole new layer in your life. I mean, I've had clients who say that they stop feeling like a burden after feeling like one their entire lives, where they're actually proud of themselves, where they start speaking up, where they quit their jobs and find their dream jobs, when they started a business that they actually wanted to, even though they're deadly scared. I know it sounds really cliche, but it takes that ever complicated experience of relationships and our emotions, and it gives a framework on how to think about it, how things connect, why they're there, and how to approach it. So please get started on identifying all the different ingredients that you have. Ask your friends on what kind of ingredients, what kind of meal they're perceiving, what kind of ingredients they're perceiving, and then try to find how they all connect, why they're there. And I know this might be daunting at first because you haven't seen like hundreds of different people and their patterns. And look, I've spent thousands of hours analyzing patterns, seeing how these things connect, understanding all the different situations, seeing how the same ingredients show up in so many different contexts and situations. It's a skill that can be built from pattern recognition as you observe all the little details about yourself, about others. And I know that you are extremely perceptive, because the truth is, if you sat here and you watched a long video just like this, you are someone who is deeply perceptive and intuitive, and you're not afraid to ask the deeper questions. And now I know you already have that ability. So start small, pick something about yourself that you don't really like, and instead of going, ugh, I don't like that, start asking, like, why is it there? Like, how is it affecting other parts of my personality? Where else did it show up? What other ingredients is it connected to? When someone criticizes you and it really, really stings, try to pull away from that shame and instead start getting curious. Like, what kind of meal are they perceiving? What kind of biases do they have? And do I really respect what they think about me? All right, thank you so much for sticking with me through this long one. I will see you in the next video.